Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 190, and we're going to talk about protectionism, aka tariffs. So the Subjective Professor podcast, what we try to do is put a different spin on conversations that are taking place right now, introduce a different perspective to try to bring about a different understanding in order to find alternate solutions, other choices. So we're not stuck, we're not trapped or feel trapped, or to identify the source of a problem that we have. I'm a little bit late today. I'm sorry. I had to go out and do car shopping. And if you've ever done car shopping in the United States, at least in the East Coast, then you know it's a big pain in the butt. Uh, and used cars, I haven't bought a new car ever, but used car prices are ridiculous too. So anyway, so whenever you see what might look like a good bargain, then you got to go look at it, right? So anyway, just got in, but I wanted to do a podcast every day, keep that going. And so we're going to talk about an easy topic like tariffs. And I know a lot of people have been talking about this, so hopefully I can bring something different to the table. So all a tariff is a tax on imported goods. So when a product comes in from a different country, it is taxed. Oh, right. Just off the top of my head, I just realized a great example. So hopefully at the end of this episode, I'll talk about that a little bit. But depending on the product, the tax rate or the tariff is going to be very, very different. And the great thing about if there could be a silver lining for the whole tariff picture, is that it could spark innovative thinking, not necessarily necessary, but innovative thinking. Okay, so anyway, who pays the tariff? I know that Donald Trump wants to say that the foreign countries who are sending goods to the United States is going to pay those taxes, and that's completely wrong. Even if they did pay something, what are they paying? Right? In other words, they're selling stuff. What are they paying? So I guess to Donald Trump, they have to pay rights to sell their product here. But that's a completely different story. And maybe he has that confused if that is part of the picture. But I'm not too sure. I've never heard of that. I'm not in the import export business, so I'm not too sure. But if I'm trying to sell something to another country and they impose a tax on it, it means that when people buy that product here in the United States, they have to pay more. It's the person who gets the product that has to pay. And so the company that's selling it has to raise their prices. And so any way you look at it, it's not the seller who is paying the tax. Now, there is a impact, there is an effect that is imposed on the seller. They sell fewer goods, right? So if I'm selling, I don't know, let's call it rice to the United States, which is probably unlikely since we have so much rice grown here in the United States. But let's just say you have a different variety of rice and you want to sell to the United States, and the United States says, whoa, 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 slow down there. I'm going to put a tax on your rice. And let's just say they double the price. So they double the price, which means that the amount of rice from that country that Americans can buy is now cut in half. Assuming that they have the same amount of money budgeted for rice, they can only buy half of what they were buying before. This either causes people to start, going hungry, or they have to look for an alternate place, a different place to buy their rice, maybe from Thailand. And so perhaps that's what Trump is thinking, right? That because the taxes on their goods, Americans are going to buy their product, the desired product, from a different country. But of course, it's not like it's exactly the same, right? So maybe the same variety of rice will taste the same and be the same, except be a lot cheaper. Okay. But once you do that, once you shift to a different seller, right, and they get all of that increased buying pressure, then their prices are going to go up too. So, any way you look at it, Americans are going to have to spend more for the whatever product it is that they want to get. So the seller sells fewer goods, and so they make less money. Maybe that's what he's talking about. But in many cases, the selling country will just find another buyer. Okay, it's not that all of that will suddenly sit on the docks and never get sold. No, they're going to unload that product on another country. Okay. And because they're trying to unload it, it's like a fire sale. They're trying to clear out all this inventory. They can mark the price down a lot more. And so, yeah, they may suffer a loss, but I don't think that it's the kind of loss and punishment that Trump is thinking about. Now, if you think about it, theoretically, a maximum tariff is basically completely blocking sales, right? So you make the price so expensive that no one can buy it at all. And that's basically, I don't know, in my head, this is probably not an the economic way that you would express it, but an embargo, right? So you're beyond, uh, you know, imposing a tax. You're just saying you can't sell it at all. And so theoretically, at least in my humanities understanding, you make the price so high no one can buy it. All right. So that's the tax. It's like infinite tax. For example, Russian oil. All right. So the United States, believe it or not, I think last time I heard, which was a few months ago, America still buys all of its uranium from Russia. So it's just weird, right? And the fact that information is so strictly controlled by the U.S. government, they can, you know, pass off this impression that we are completely cut off from Russia when in fact we are not. Another example too would be Russian oil. So the United States was buying a tremendous amount of oil from Russia. And with the embargo, they were like, haha, we're not going to buy your oil anymore. Politically, the propaganda says we're not going to buy their oil any longer. However, we were still buying their oil. And the number one way of doing that was it went first passed through India, right? So either India bought it and became a new middleman for the United States, and so they would buy it and then pass it on to the United States, or India would refine the oil first and then sell it on to the United States. And so that way, also, the oil becomes much more expensive because you introduce a middleman. So, again, a tariff, even the theoretical infinite tariff of a ban, doesn't work. It results in higher prices for people in America. But the point is that foreign goods are more expensive. So if foreign goods become more expensive because of the tariff, then people theoretically are supposed to buy American made products, right? So foreign products become so expensive, we're forced to buy American made products. So, but unfortunately, there, back in the day, when tariffs were imposed on foreign goods, I don't know, like say Japanese cars, because they were less expensive, used much less gas, right? Had better gas mileage. And so in the 1970s, when there was a big oil embargo, everyone was scrambling to buy Japanese cars, and no one wanted to buy the gas guzzling domestic cars, American cars. And there was a big crisis. I don't know if you remember or recall or you heard stories, but a lot of the American car companies went bankrupt because no one could buy or wanted to buy gas guzzling American cars. And so a lot of people were scrambling and falling over themselves to buy the more economical Japanese cars, which were very inexpensive. Well, what happened was, in order to protect domestic car companies, they slapped a tariff on Japanese cars, making them artificially more expensive than they actually were. And what that was supposed to do was give American car companies some breathing room, time to catch up, time to retool, redesign all of their cars, retool their factories to make the newly redesigned cars to compete with the foreign cars. That's what's supposed to happen. But what actually happens is, yeah, that happens too, but much, much slowly. In the meantime, what happens is a lot of car companies start to profit, right? So they raise their prices first without changing their product. Whoever is still buying American cars, well, the prices are still comparable now with Japanese cars. So if you got a choice, you buy American, right? Because that was the big slogan, buy American. And so now it's more reasonable to be patriotic because the prices are similar. And so you're going to buy a Ford, you're going to buy that Chevy because, you know, the price difference between the American car and the Japanese car wasn't all that much any longer. Like there wasn't a big, it wasn't that much cheaper to buy uh, uh, a Japanese car. And so instead of improving their product, they did all of these other things, which inflated the cost of American cars, uh, forcing Americans to have to buy overpriced American cars. Right. And so either the CEOs were making lots of money or the workers were allowed to get their pay raises after going on strike. The point is that capital investment, the investment to improve their product and the way they made their products, the way that Henry Ford just revolutionized the automotive manufacturing process, you didn't have that. And so at the same time, because of the tariff, foreign companies are doing what they can to lower their costs, right? To try to, somehow affect the tariff one way or another, but it doesn't have the effect. Tariffs just keep the price high so that Americans think that foreign cars cost as much as domestic cars. So the ultimate effect is that US companies are further behind. They drop further behind in quality, in production, and now they're tariff dependent. Okay. So a couple of examples of how this would work. A long time ago, the Korean community in America, what they did was they had businesses making clothing. All right. And so there were factories all over the city where they would make clothing to be sold in America. And then through all of these new regulations, it became impractical for clothing to be made in the United States. It was much cheaper to be made in other countries. And so all of those factories closed here in the United States. And now all of our clothing is imported from other countries. Okay. So any kind of tariff on foreign products just simply makes the clothing more expensive. And so basically in that situation, most of the domestic businesses were regulated out of business. And inflation is one reason for that. And we've talked about in the previous episode where the inflation gets so bad that it's no longer worth it to build and make things here in the United States. And so you outsource it to other countries whose economies are much weaker. But the clearest example is automakers, right? They became lazy, they fell behind, and now there's just no way for them to catch up, right? And so most American cars are not made in the United States, they're made in Central and South America. Foreign cars are made in the United States, so you don't make them in another country, put them on a boat, and then bring them to the United States. No, you just make them in the United States. And it kind of is a wash because the factories that used to make American cars were retooled to make foreign cars, you see. But which cars are the domestic cars? Which cars are the foreign cars? The imports, right? So most Japanese cars are made in the United States by Americans, but they're called imports, right? And most American cars are not made in the United States and they're made not by Americans, but they're called domestic. It's kind of funny that way, right? But without tariffs, right, to unravel all of that, to unwind all of the business practices that developed over the decades, in accord with the tariffs. I mean, it'll be kind of very much upending. It'd be like overturning a table, uh, you know, full of dominoes. It would just be very difficult to, uh, for some people, to reacclimate, as it were. So tariffs basically are just simply protection for domestic production initially. That's what it's for, to give time for domestic companies to catch up so they can make products as good as other countries. And so that tells you already that American production is behind. And so the only things that are really still made in the United States are the things that are not made in other countries. Like, for example, guns, right? Guns are legal ones, anyone are pretty much made in the United States, right? Black market ones are, made in other countries and smuggled into the United States. But that pretty much we can see as a thriving domestic industry. But see, that's the question. What do we still make in the United States, which stands in competition with, for example, Chinese products? What do we make that can compete with flat screen computer monitors, with computers, with anything? I mean, all this stuff is made in different countries, right? If not China, then in Southeast Asia somewhere, right? Uh, all of these products, none of them are made in the United States. I mean, even in Japan, what does even Japan make anymore? The best audio electronic equipment, TVs, and they were all Japanese, and then now they're not. A lot of them are Korean, right? So what do we make in the United States that competes with other countries? Hardly anything. I remember there were stories of reporters who would try to buy anything made in the United States, right? It's like they would impose their restriction on themselves and say, I'm going to go out and I'm only going to buy products that are made in the USA. And people were outraged, right? There was nothing that they could find. Like the only thing they can find that was made in the USA was something no one really wanted to buy, right? It was some kind of sort of buy once in a while product, right? But as far as clothing, electronics, toasters, refrigerators, all this stuff, none of it was made in the United States. And maybe it outraged a lot of people. And so it forced a lot of companies to buy all of the products that they need to assemble the final product, right? And so you'll see a lot of labels that'll say assembled in the United States. Well, what does that mean? That means, two pieces were put together in the United States. And so we can say made in the United States or assembled in the United States. But 99% of it was made in a different country. Okay. Another thing that I remember, I'll put it in here. So when it comes to innovation, I saw a story not that long ago about dolls. Okay, so dolls versus action figures. Apparently, the taxes on dolls are extremely, extremely high. So when people started making, when comic books became a thing, they were like, oh, let's make some sort of dolls that go along with the comic books. And so they tried to import these dolls into the United States that were made overseas to sort of support the whole comic book industry and everything. Taxed at the doll rate. Okay. If they were labeled as dolls, they would make them so expensive no one would buy them. And so they came up with a different classification. They decided to call them action figures. And so they would have to create a different tax schedule for action figures, right? And there was this whole legal battle. No, they're just dolls. No, they're action figures. And so I think there was a documentary on that. I watched it, and they were able to get a much lower tax rate, right? And so that's why action figures can sell for like $8 and dolls are like $100. Okay. And it's because of that. It's because of the import tariffs, right? The tariffs that are imposed on them because they're all made overseas. Now, who gets the tax money? Well, that's the kicker, right? The government is the entity which collects taxes. And so, on the one hand, they're promising that we're doing this for the American people, but in reality, the government is collecting the taxes that the US people have to pay. Once upon a time, I said that products at Walmart, which were all at the time made in China, would become luxury goods. And this is how it happens. But I remember when I would say it in class, people would laugh at me. They were like, I'm never going to shop at Walmart, with all the Walmart hate and stuff. But it's probably not luxury goods yet. And probably still a lot of people would rather be dead than shop at Walmart. But they skipped over Walmart, and more people are shopping at the dollar store, Dollar Tree, Dollar General, whatever. Dollar stores are the place and the destiny for people to go shopping because Walmart is simply too expensive. Maybe the United States is the only country that buys stuff from places like China. And so they have no other place to offload all the junk that Americans buy. I don't know. But in the meantime, if the demand from America drops, there will be pain, some temporary pain, economic pain in China. But then the factories will just shift their production to other products that other countries want to buy. So it's painful in the short run, but the Chinese government is not known for their sympathy for the average citizen, Chinese citizen. So they'll do what it takes. In the meantime, we here in the United States will continue to pay more and more for the same product or even products that are of lesser quality. Something to think about. And that's it for this episode. I will talk to you next time.